So Bill says that it was Sabbath keepers that crucified Jesus, and in one sense, that's true. But on a much deeper sense, no, it's not. You see, the Sabbath, according to Exodus 20, Deuteronomy 5, Ezekiel 20, verse 12, and many other texts, the Sabbath calls us to a life of holiness, to a life of mercy, a ministry of getting outside of ourselves and giving up our sin in full surrender to Jesus. Now, you can read through the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and you can study the character of these professed religious leaders of the Jewish people, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, what have you. And you can see, it's not difficult to see that their hearts were as black as sin. They were extremely wicked people. They would do things like plot the murder of Jesus on the Sabbath. They would do things like put ridiculous rules around the Sabbath that made it an absolute burden and would zap all the joy out of such a beautiful day. And that in and of itself is also a violation of the Sabbath. You see, they professed to be expositors and guardians of the law, to the point where they put all these ridiculous restrictions in an effort to protect themselves from going back to idolatry as their ancestors were involved in. But in doing these ridiculous rules, they went further into idolatry than their ancestors did. And so they didn't understand, they failed to understand that Isaiah 58 says that the Sabbath is supposed to be a day of joy, of gladness, of rejoicing, of mercy, of healing, of deeds of life, of joy, and things like that. And so when Jesus comes along and shows them really how to truly keep the Sabbath, they hated him and they crucified him for it. Interestingly enough, they didn't want to crucify Jesus until he showed them how to properly keep the Sabbath. And then it says they went away to plot how they might do away with him. So you see, while on a surface level, these men who claimed to be Sabbath keepers crucified Jesus, on a much deeper heart level, they weren't Sabbath keepers at all. Because the Sabbath calls us to holiness, to surrender of sin and self, and to let Jesus on the throne of your heart. Have a good day.